Hey there, welcome back to Reddit Dating, the best channel for Reddit cheating stories. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for more stories like these. Now, let's get into the video.
Caught wife cheating, I file for divorce, wife tries to commit suicide. I'll try to make this brief, but it's still rather lengthy. 11 years have passed since my wife and I, both 33 years old, were united in marriage. We just have one child, 6F. We have a large home, and she makes somewhat more than I do, but we are typically in good financial standing. To begin with, our marriage had been excellent, with the usual ups and downs. However, that changed at the beginning of last month. My new career, which I obtained after being dismissed from my previous position as a result of the epidemic, necessitates a significant amount of travel. My wife was relieved since she had begun to grumble when she realized that she was the only one working and that I was doing nothing to seek for a new position. I had been away for 2 weeks, and this was the first time I had traveled for work outside of the city limits. I was fortunate in that I was able to return home 3 days early. After stopping to pick up some flowers to surprise my wife, he works as a florist, I find my wife in the kitchen putting her clothes back on as my buddy is zipping his trousers. My pulse rate fell, and I felt like I was about to pass out. I couldn't see anything and felt sick to my stomach. I got my phone out of my pocket and snapped a couple pictures. When I go back to my vehicle, I depart and make a reservation for a hotel room a few miles away. I send my wife a text message informing her that I would not be able to return home for another week owing to business obligations. Cheating has always been a deal breaker for me, and it continues to remain so. I've seen what cheating can do to individuals since my brother has been cheated on multiple times, and it has left him completely broken. I call him and tell him everything, he is quite supportive. We then contact his attorney and file for divorce. My wife is served a week after that. My phone is inundated with messages and phone calls. She claims she was the one who cheated, and I hang off the phone after sending her the evidence. She has invited me to her house to chat. In order to prevent her from spinning the tale, I texted the images to my parents and her parents, and then I turned off my phone and decided to use my work phone. When I turn it back on 2 days later, my phone is inundated with messages and phone calls from friends and family members. I had a conversation with my mother, who wants me to go check on my daughter. When I arrive home, my wife is on her knees, pleading and weeping, pleading for forgiveness and another opportunity. She was a shambles, and she seemed to be someone who hadn't had any sleep in a long time. I was having none of it, so I gathered up her belongings and ejected her from my residence in a rage. She dialed her parents' phone number and asked them to come pick her up. She spends the whole day outside my door, sobbing and pleading with me to open the door so that we may chat to one another. It is my parents' responsibility to pick up my kid from school and care for her for the following several days. My wife attempted to communicate with me throughout the following several weeks. She would show up at my place of employment, and I would find her at the door in the morning before I went for work and before I returned home from work, asking her pals to make an effort to communicate with me. My parents, having been persuaded to support her, have asked me to at the very least attempt to communicate with her. Her parents even came to her house and sought to speak with her about how she isn't doing so well. Other times, she came to me with her buddies in an attempt to communicate with me. Insisting that I didn't want to discuss the adultery or reconciliation, I instead preferred that we focus only on the divorce was a futile exercise. Whatever the case, everything came to a halt for a few days before I received a phone call from my mother informing me that my wife had attempted suicide. She was in the hospital at the time. Mom requested if I may go check on her since she had attempted suicide as a result of my presence. When I arrive at the hospital, her parents refused to allow me to visit her, particularly her mother, who stared at me with chilly eyes. The majority of her friends and relatives held me responsible. Because my wife repeatedly asking whether I was coming to check on her, the nurse speaks with them. When I go into the room, she instantly begins to sob. I felt sad for her and pity for her. She expressed her regrets passionately. She expressed concern about losing me and said that if I were not there in her life, her existence would be worthless. She described the affair as the most dumb and selfish decision she had ever made in her life. They had been having an emotional affair for a week before I left, and it had culminated in my departure. And became physically abusive when I left. It's been 2 weeks since the incident occurred, and I urged her to allow me some time to process it. And I've been completely numb the whole time. She has been freed and is now living with her parents. And I'll be checking in on her on a regular basis. I'm not sure what I'm searching for, and this is probably just a rant. Story 2. Stuck and need advice. 9 years have passed since my wife, 35F, and I, 35M, were united in marriage. I had a strong feeling that my wife was suffering from an AP around 3 weeks ago when her behavior, confidence, and appearance started to alter abruptly. I gathered information and oscillates between thinking yeah, this is occurring and thinking no, I'm insane. To provide some context, my wife has been a stay-at-home parent for the most of the previous 6 years, and 2 key occurrences occurred in December. The first is that her grandmother, who was more like a mother to her, started to fail fast, and my wife took on the role of carer, through a painful end-of-life experience of her own. During that time, she obtained her EMA certification and started volunteering with the local emergency medical services. In January, as my suspicions grew and became more clear, I dialed her phone and faced her with the reality of the situation. She came clean and confessed to an EA with someone from EMS that had been going on for 3 to 5 weeks after several chats and conversations. After a few dates and what she claims were 3 physical interactions, kissing, things progressed to the next level, but nothing more. We had many talks, and I was certain that she was telling the truth, feeling regret and wanting to make things right. I also observed that her mental health had deteriorated significantly, most likely as a result of her grandmother's death. Following my confrontation with her, she had severe anxiety and panic episodes, which necessitated my assisting her in seeking medical attention and finding an IC therapist in order to begin some IC with the goal of eventually beginning MC. Earlier today, she had her first session. To be really honest, I justified this as a lapse in judgment, and with her honesty and the context of the scenario, I saw how someone she met who was paying her attention and had gone through similar trauma and experiences might create this circumstance. When this happened, it was approximately 2 weeks ago. We were chatting and interacting almost every day, and we were breaking new ground and communicating in ways we had never done before. However, the reality is that we had legitimate concerns in our marriage that I wanted to address. We came to an agreement to continue ahead with the distinct knowledge that trust was essential. My wife had brought up the subject of her returning to EMS while we were trying to reconcile, and I told her I would think about it and eventually agreed to try it under the conditions that she would not be present when AP was present and that any contact would be known or discussed if it happened accidentally, as long as she was not there. Despite the fact that she had not returned, she had exhibited growing worry about meeting him and voiced regret over the fact that she felt she had relied on him for emotional support. Fast forward to today, 2 weeks after day 1, when my wife returns home from Target, and I immediately realized something was up since she recognized him. I went up against him. It took her some time before she finally acknowledged to seeing him. According to reports, he texted her from a friend's phone 2 days earlier, asking whether she was all right. She answered today, saying that she would meet her at Target. She tells me that she wanted closure and that this was the way to get it. She alleges she explained what had happened and her regrets. She betrayed my confidence by lying again. I'm not sure what to trust anymore. After addressing her, I discovered that she is suffering from anxiety, panic, and most likely additional symptoms. My wife and I have 2 children, so I'm enraged because she is the one who has been screwed over, but she is powerless, and I'm stuck trying to ensure that she can function and get the bare minimum of healthcare so that I can even begin to sift through this mess. It's typical of her to screw me over while insisting that it's all about her. Despite her repeated pleas, I am at a loss for what to believe or do in this situation. Advice?